Out of all the Nintendo Switch 2 games announced so far, Kirby Air Riders is probably the best. It expands on what made the original so great and adds to that pile with new characters, customization, a story, and more. I say all of this to reassure you that the purpose of this video isn't to make you feel bad for buying it, but to help avoid the possibility of this drama, or any future drama of similar nature, vanishing in this wide ocean we call the internet. In my prediction video, I didn't give the negative voices much attention. I thought they'd just come and go in a few weeks, as a common sentiment was that we probably would have gotten to learn more about its features as time went on. Unfortunately, not much was done to reduce worries, and those who got upset by the not so positive things they heard only got more and more defensive. These arguments have done so much damage to the discussions that it seemed you couldn't say anything negative about the game without being chastised, regardless of your overall thoughts on it. I feel that context isn't needed, but for the sake of keeping everyone on the same page, let's do a quick recap. In 1992, Sakurai worked on a beginner-friendly Game Boy title which would later become Kirby's Dream Land. And as the IP became a fully fledged series, directed two more mainline titles, Kirby's Adventure and Kirby's Fun Pack. As the millennium came to a close and a new one began, his role on future entries got much smaller than the previous three, directing the other franchise most people remember him for, Super Smash Bros. That is until 2003, when the original Kirby Air Ride released, which ended up being his last hurrah when it came to Kirby for 2 decades. He was a special advisor for Kirby and the Amazing Mirror the following year, and that was it for a while. 21 years later, and we've treated with a teaser for a sequel to Kirby Air Ride during the first Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. And while everyone was certainly looking forward to it, a small group was worried that the game was barely going to acknowledge elements outside of the 4 games Sakurai directed, since the representation of that series in the Super Smash Bros. Franchise has been rather lacking. We good? Okay, allow me to introduce you to the concept of toxic positivity. I really want to understand those who defended the game. It really sucks when you're hyped for something and your peers don't share the same sentiments. But there's being optimistic about a new product in spite of what's expected, and then there's what happened while we were waiting for the directs. You could say all of this happened because it was one of the most anticipated releases in the franchise's history, but so was Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And whatever complaint you got for being negative about it pales in comparison to the backlash you received if you were expressing your thoughts about how Air Riders could have lacked in a certain aspect. I do believe this was a case of Daddy Sakurai mentality. What's that, I hear you ask? Well, it's basically when you're such a big fan of Sakurai that you will dismiss any complaint with the idea that it's insulting to him or his vision. It might sound crazy, but the further we go into this abyss of madness, the more you'll see what I mean. It was a common talking point in the Smash community, and despite creating the series, the Kirby fandom didn't really suffer from this problem until this year. So yeah, I guess that's how Jebzon felt when he talked about it 6 years ago. Great! I miss you, Jeb. Let me put it into perspective. A 1-minute teaser is not deep enough for you to be mildly worried. It is, however, deep enough for you to have a pity party the moment one of your friends tells you, hey, maybe you shouldn't spend so much money on a game. It is also deep enough for you to cancel your attempts at taking your own life. I am not making this up or taking a joke too seriously. This is a genuine post. I know that games have helped authors when they were in their darkest hours, but when all you have of said game is an announcement trailer, maybe wait some time before sharing your story. And then there's the counter arguments. One of the most common arguments was that asking for more playable characters was an inherent demand, as the original game focused more on vehicles. I can't stress enough how frequent this talking point was used. You could not escape it.
What people associate with Air Ride is a group of colorful Kirbys soaring on their stars. Air Ride's item system revolved around copy abilities, which is why only Kirbys were playable, while Meta Knight and DDD were limited to specific playstyles.
And that's a correct statement. But just because the sequel has a proper roster now, it doesn't mean the central focus has been immediately forgotten. Take Kirby Fighters, another Kirby party game. Similarly to Air Ride, what people associate with it is a group of colorful Kirbys duking it out. And yet the sequel took the time to include mainstays like DDD, Meta Knight and Bandana D, as well as fan favorites like Magolor and Gui. But even then, the small advertising it had still focused on the novelty of fighting as Kirby against other Kirbys. Yes, in a broader sense, the playable characters in the GameCube title were the vehicles, but the logic is flawed. It'd be like if you asked for more characters in a 2D Mario game to be playable before Wonder was announced, and I said, no, that's stupid. We already have the power-ups you grab while traveling the levels. Both of them offer different playstyles. But do you know what characters have that power-ups or vehicles don't? A personality that players can latch onto. I don't see how including more characters in a sequel to one of the most popular spin-offs, not just from the Kirby series, but one of the most popular spin-offs affiliated to Nintendo in general, could hurt its quality or reputation. If anything, their inclusion will be in the game and the series' favor. In the game's favor because by proxy of including more content, and substantial content at that, it will have a dedicated community for more than 2 weeks, which is a big deal given what happened with the Nintendo spin-offs released 3 years ago. And in the series' favor by enticing those who weren't kept up with it in the last 3 decades to try out titles they wouldn't have tried otherwise. It's not as prevalent as it was before Forgotten Land, but there's still people who think that the franchise peaked in the 90s, and everything after that is mediocre at best, especially during its New Super Mario Bros. Phase. We were already seeing others claim that game was somehow the first worthy successor in a while for doing what the IP has done for the previous 11 years, but in 3D. We didn't want Air Riders to inadvertently help their case. It could have been even worse in that case, like imagine people saying that Kirby as a series is at its best with Sakurai, and the creative director has failed to do 1/10 of what he can manage. On top of that, a AAA racing game without a roster just sounds weird to me. On a surface level, this argument doesn't make sense, but if you get deeper into this mindset, you can see why people could make this argument. Not necessarily agree, but still.
If Air Riders once again bases its mechanics around copy abilities as items, including a wide range of characters with fixed skills could easily disrupt the game's balance. Air Ride was pretty unbalanced thanks to how drastically the stars differed from one another, and adding character-specific skills would only widen that gap even more.
And I see another problem. I don't know if the Kirby fandom has just forgotten about it, but the production of Air Ride was notably rushed. Sakurai has gone on record in its game concepts video that it initially had a 1-year development cycle, but because not a single machine worked properly, the code had to be completely rewritten, with the developers spending a little over 3 months figuring it out before release. With that perspective, it's easy to assume that a lack of balance among the machines could be a direct consequence of that troubled production, that the developers simply didn't have enough time to balance out their stats. You start wondering if it affected other aspects, or even resulted in certain features being cut before its release, as the task was too daunting. Perhaps this could be the reason why the character roster was so minuscule. I'm not saying that it's 100% the case without a doubt, but it is a believable conclusion. I mean, Channel Kirby acknowledges this in the same video. He also acknowledged that the game was never meant to be played competitively in the video about the first Direct, and if that wasn't enough, he collaborated with VC for a roster prediction. a roster prediction where he deliberately asks for 2 non-Sakurai characters and many random enemies. Of course, it could be that Risi wrote the script and he just read the lines he was given to record, but it's the fact that he recorded them in the first place that's awkward. So I suppose it was okay to demand for their inclusion the whole time. If only he had this attitude earlier.
As I said, it's also important to recognize that Air Ride already stood firmly on its own. Sure, it featured Dynablade, a few classic soundtracks and some familiar enemies, but around 80% of the game was entirely original.
You know, the same original game that famously has nearly half of its soundtrack comprised of tracks from the anime and remixes of past titles, but you know, let's just call that a few classic soundtracks. I'm not saying Air Ride is a celebration of the franchise in the same vein as Star Allies, but come on! This originality argument is blown out of proportion. And the more you think about it, the more it makes those who seriously argue about that look like they're upset at the idea of their game having any fan service other than the bare minimum. At the end of the day, Air Riders still stands on its own, regardless of the amounts of racers it features. Furthermore, while I do agree that Return to Dreamland Deluxe includes a lot of masks, they aren't used as a crutch, and I believe using this specific example gives the impression that we wanted a Mugen roster. No one shared this sentiment. As you listen to these arguments, one question arises. When people talk about fans who believe Sakurai hates the newer games, which fans are they talking about? With how quickly they were in critiquing this side of the fandom, you'd think they had some evidence to back up those claims. But if you ask those who agreed in the comments of those videos to talk about any examples, they will stay silent on the matter. So, what gives? If they're concerned about accidentally encouraging others to harass them, then just censor their names and avatars. But to be fair, I understand why you never saw them pointing to any specific examples, because when they did, their arguments fell apart. Super Kirby's The Future of Kirby showcases 4 pieces of evidence, and immediately you understand why it was a bad decision. 3 of them are just memes on Half Kirby and Dexus's reaction, which he has publicly stated to be over-exaggerated on purpose. Just because someone has a concern or request that may not be fulfilled, doesn't mean they won't enjoy the product. While some demands are more likely to be met than others, many of the individuals making these requests weren't even particularly insistent or rude about them. People like me were not expecting more than 6 characters, and were even satisfied with the 12 we received in the first presentation. So it feels disingenuous that those protesting against them would label them as ungrateful brats who don't understand the intent of the original GameCube title, or that they must have had all their wishes met in order to appreciate the sequel. There are people who have said and still are saying that Sakurai hates modern Kirby, but how many times have you seen it happen? Now, how many times have others claimed that it happened? Oh, and check this out. This video puts Dexus's beat on blast, but it acknowledges that it's a joke. How nice. It'd be different if it was about how annoying it was, but acting as if a video where the line "there will be no more women in Kirby" is said holds any weight to your argument? It doesn't. Either you laugh or you click off. That's what I hate the most about this quarrel. It's so disingenuous. Again, I'm not saying that nobody was being unreasonable or claiming with a straight face that Sakurai hates modern Kirby, but from my experience, there weren't enough cases to report on that behavior. More often than not, people argued Sakurai had a bias against modern Kirby, not that he hated it. And while it's true that the definition of the word biased is to be prejudiced for or against someone or something, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way people on the internet use it. It's like pointing out how one guy might favor clothes with darker colors. They might be biased for them, but that doesn't automatically mean they hate ones with lighter colors. The only way I can justify the reporting is if those claims spread on Twitter like wildfire, and they felt that showing such examples would make it harder to take their side seriously. Needless to say, if that's the case, then they've shot themselves in the foot by not showing anything at all. And even if the reporters were more charitable, I can say that fans had no reason to believe Air Riders wouldn't have had much to do with what the series was about after the mid-2000s. Yes, Kirby's representation in the Smash franchise is lacking in content. Does that mean Sakurai has a bias against the media he didn't take part in? Not necessarily. I fully understand that he might prioritize reimagining the same tunes and reconceptualizing the same stages because he knows his games better. That's fine. But when he does all of that while giving leftovers to fans of more recent titles, it's not hard to see why some will be disappointed. Yes, Smash is a crossover game with multiple IPs to worry about, many of which have the representation prioritizing a certain era, but that doesn't mean others are completely ignored, even when it comes to looking outside of Nintendo's flagship franchises. Take Mega Man. While it mostly consists of elements from the classic series, particularly the first 3 games, they still took the time to make trophies for X, Zero, and Mega Man.exe, moves like the wall jump that are taken from the EX series, and every Mega Man from the sub-series helps classic Mega Man when he uses his final smash, not to mention the central highway arrangement added in Ultimate. Is there other content that could be added? Absolutely, but at least it doesn't feel like a certain part of the franchise history gets almost nothing. With Kirby, it's not that there aren't elements from non-Sakurai games, but almost all of them are from media made 20 years ago. And while Mega Man's franchise hasn't had that major of a shake-up for a long time, Kirby has changed a lot in the 2010s, and that change just doesn't feel present. The only elements that promote games directed by Kumazaki that are original to the Smash series are 2 Final Smashes and some Kirby's Adventure Wii trophies. And while ported tracks are there, half of them are from that very same game. Please don't bring up the spirits. With trophies reusing models from other games, at least there was some effort put into them. Spirits are just glorified ported PNGs. I'm not saying that the far from ideal Kirby representation ruins the Smash series, or any game in particular, not that it's the only franchise that deserved better, but you can't deny the potential for more content. Fighters like Bendy, music from mainline games that just isn't there, not even from older titles, a remix of Dark Castle of St. Canyon would go hard, stages from Triple Deluxe of Star Allies, and so on and so forth. Even something random from a non-Sakurai game that nobody cares about would be a start. If you're gonna claim stuff like that is not necessary, then I'll have to challenge that statement, because a lot of stuff we did get wasn't either. Regardless of how much you like them, was a second battle building remix necessary? Was the inclusion of the entirety of Dreamland soundtrack in a stage about that title necessary? Was the inclusion of Bomber as an item necessary when we already have Bob-Omb? And then there's Nightmares as this trophy and the Great Cave Offensive stage which just suck. Or maybe I'm just a fake fan. Maybe a character that's been Kirby's player 2 since 2011, one of the most requested fighters since the Smash Bros. Days, is less important than one of the most hated stages in this series' history. Eventually, you have to step out of your comfort zone. This video was made to appeal to a very annoying audience, and boy was it a success. Second most popular on his channel, by the way. And it baffles me that almost no one has called out its flaws, because don't get it twisted, he did not apologize after the presentations. He has only doubled down on it. This attitude isn't even exclusive to this debacle. This is how he responded to the amount of backlash to his "DDD should be evil again" statement as well. He does not want to be corrected. He'll keep saying what he wants to say, even if it's hurting the community in the process. If he feels any remorse about it, he's doing a terrible job at showing it. He could have just tackled this topic in his Ops and Fears video and have that be it. How hard could it have been to write down something along the lines of "I'm not too preoccupied with the playable characters because the teaser might have not shown them to amplify the suspense. And even if there aren't many playable characters in the final game, there are more important things to a game, like the product being complete at launch." That was all he needed to say. It would have rubbed some people the wrong way, but it would have been polite. Besides, those who were targeted for being ungrateful realized their overreactions and made a few jokes at their expense in good fun. And to be fair, the guy behind the post with that pretty absurd claim apologized to the subreddit after the first presentation. I like a good portion of the other side of the debacle, which doubled down on guilt-tripping you for doubting him, while using rage bait made for fun as evidence. And as much as they're okay with the game being a love letter to the franchise now, essentially celebrating what they were attacking other fans for, but like amplified by 10, they still seem to be allergic to the idea of adding more content to the point where they won't allow others to wish for one more character, because the development process was such a pain in the— Oh my god, you guys. Sakurai is an adult. He's not your younger brother, he's not your son. He's at least 20 years older than most of you. If he cared about this BS, he would have already acknowledged it. You have been so loud about this over-exaggeration you have spread to the point where bystanders are still talking about it, unable to face the idea that it's not the way you've portrayed it, because they don't want to take the blame. And we are supposed to apologize for your mistakes? Nah man, you owe us an apology for putting words in our mouths. Especially Mr. Neutral over here. Like, okay, we were wrong about him. He does care about us, he always makes good games and it was stupid to doubt him. Can we stop speaking on his behalf? It's getting creepy. Actually, since you knew the game was gonna be good before the presentation, let's imagine, just for fun, what if it sucked? What if the presentations had very few things to show and the title a significant lack of content? What if it was as bad as the most recent Mario sports games? Would it have been fine to be negative about it then? Or is it always wrong to be negative about its creation? TLDR, I hate the Daddy Sakurai mentality. It's unnecessary, it intentionally misunderstands other points of view, and those who aren't on the receiving end need to be more empathetic in the future. Not that I believe they will understand such a complex ability anytime soon, given their very similar behavior in other conversations. These are the same people who shove the same 3 jokes and theories down your throat, and then when you criticize them, they call you a fan hater. Or they claim that the reason they're disagreeing with the popular fan interpretations is to stab Meteor in the back, and not because they came to a different conclusion. These are the same people who defend Laura Crate Kirby by saying it's just a different interpretation, and then, when a different interpretation is brought to the table, they're the first to criticize it because that's not how Kirby would act in the source material. Even when something not worth getting mad over comes up, like showing a design is closer to an older title than a newer one, without talking about whether one is better or worse, they have a stroke. Yes sir, the Kirby fandom is getting as bad as the Sonic fandom, because of people like you. And if you give them a pass because yeah they're annoying but at least they're not being gross, hold on to the thought, because there have been such examples in the last 3 years. Thor Kirby was found on his NSFW Twitter account not just liking, but supporting artists making and CP drawings, with some zoophilia mixed in for good measure. And he's not the only one like this. Connor Jackson, better known as FNAF Bandy Kirby Fan 1, Mario Uncool, Kirby Fan 122, or whatever pseudonym he will go by tomorrow, not only supported, but constantly requested for NSFW drawings and animations involving minors, many of which were about Isosi and Tiff. The worst thing about it? Those situations have largely gone unnoticed by the community. Nobody seems to know what kind of guy they're really supporting when they promote Thor Kirby. I myself didn't get to know about these tragic facts until someone linked a Twitter thread on a now deleted post debating the fandom's toxicity. And while multiple streams have been made about corner scenes by their victims, they haven't reached more than 1,000 views at most, and therefore he had the chance to showcase his normal art on Kirby's Dream display last year and this year. I will point out that he did make an apology Google Doc, I guess to distance himself from the stigma that YouTube apologies have, and he does mention Bonifan, one of his bigger victims and the guy who exposed him first, by name, but he doesn't talk about any of the gross requests in detail. He just talks about them in a very vague way, and then when he mentions the other artists whom he requested to make inappropriate material for him, it's just, when I cut ties with Bonifan, I ask other people to do these things. Make of that what you will. And then there's ToxicPea and Sam the Tuna. Last, but unfortunately not least, this parody of the subspace emissary made by Xandrikos. If you thought drawings and short animations were bad, how about full-on videos with fetishy scenes involving Kirby? Already there's a lot to discuss about whether or not it's okay to make an aged-up version of an underaged character do nasty stuff. But having them not aged up or worse, aged down, and putting them in situations like this is unacceptable. Take a good look at them and tell me how they're not lewd in the slightest. I usually don't complain about this content because it's on adult websites anyway, but this is on YouTube and not age restricted. It's fully exposed for everyone to see. So, what if a kid watches it? That would be awful, wouldn't it? But apparently not, since whoever complained about the fetishes got replies that argue that they're apparently depicted so unflatteringly in these animations that I seriously doubt any of the animators have them. Why are you laughing? I'm not shaming anyone for having kinks, but when kids are involved and you're defending their inclusion, I'd say you should take a good look in the mirror and ask yourself who's really in the wrong. Mind you, this is just the stuff I found out and could probably explain. There could be more situations like this that I either don't know or don't understand. This fandom is far from the squeaky clean place it's made out to be. I know this video is about Air Riders, and now it's kind of become a sequel to my Kirby community rant, but the reason I wanted to bring out these issues today is to show what the fandom truly cares about. Dead horses beaten, misinformation, supporters of illegal content, those are not high on their priority list. The most heinous crime a fan can commit is not falling in love with a new game the moment it's announced that it exists. More playable characters was a concept we were asking often before we got the teaser, and rarely did you see anyone against it. But then as soon as Nintendo showed us the teaser came excuse after excuse, painting one side of the fanbase in a negative light. Because people can handle other perspectives. Because they can't form their own opinions without them being validated. because it's a tribute to Iwata. Because a 22-year-old game did this, it didn't do that, and it just won't stop. Even when it wasn't about the characters and just asking for the game not to be lazy, a reasonable thing to talk about given what happened with the Switch 1 and what's happening now with the Switch 2, that didn't stop you from getting complaints about how doubting Sakurai was insulting. Because of course it is. Meanwhile, bad actors are allowed to do whatever they want because it's got the reputation of being a cut above the rest. And not how when I reported on the Tamer stuff, it was seen as a waste of time and energy, but the way Kirby Air Riders concerns were reported was anything but. This is nothing new either. There have been multiple people in this fandom lamenting their frustrations for how self-centered or hypocritical a good portion of the fandom is before I even got into the series, especially on Dark Kirby, and that was when protest posts were allowed. Nowadays, it's as if you can't make a playful joke about its fallacies without having your post deleted altogether. Words can't describe the feeling you get from learning and experiencing years of incidents that have forgotten the moment they're no longer important, culminating in its biggest content creators strawmanning other fans, their peers, to make them look awful for no other reason other than defend somebody who doesn't need help, while those who don't know any better wonder, why did Kirby fans become this toxic? This is why. But this is also why the fanbase doesn't see those incidents as problems worth discussing. It can't be that they're indifferent towards talking about them, because when there is a safe space for them to do it without being jumped, they will do it. When I made that rant in February, I saw a lot of people expressing what they despised about the Kirby fandom, both the past and present. How they appreciated me for saying these things. They still talk about it all. If anything, the reason why drama doesn't come out of it as often as in other fandoms, or isn't talked about as much, is that smaller individuals are scared to be honest, because their words will be twisted, ridiculed, used as a weapon against them. It's either that, or other two possibilities. Either they don't have the means to talk about these issues properly, or they just haven't heard of them. On the other hand, those who have caused those incidents over the years have been defended by the community. After all, those who call you subhuman are only trying to send you to the right path, and those who treat queer individuals like trash are only doing it because they're Catholic. And those who have spread this misinformation are getting the same treatment. Channel Kirby did nothing wrong. He was just repeating what people said and expressing his thoughts on the matter. We can debate all day about whether Sakurai has preferences or not, and if this concern was stupid, but this talking point has been used as a shield for upset fans to say things they would have never said otherwise. I'm sure there are good intentions behind them, but if you're so butthurt at someone being concerned about its state that you have to argue that they're villainizing the director and not forgetting that he made a lot of people happy, something that's absolutely still applicable to the folks who shaped up the identities of characters you are so passionately dismissing, you need to calm down. Bad fandoms get criticized all the time, and not many people chastise the reporters because not everyone is like that. Even when it comes to more well-behaved ones, even when it's simply a matter of being misinformed, people aren't spared from this treatment. But then when it comes to the Kirby community, there's this discouragement from talking about its flaws in depth, almost as if calling out these incidents is more harmful than the incidents themselves. This fandom is perhaps the most extreme example of people doing asinine stuff and getting away with it I've ever seen. What's ironic is that despite being scrutinized a lot back when the web series started, the amazing digital circus overall has a better community. Say what you will about the amount of Rule 34 drawings of Pomni and how certain fans are overly defensive towards checks, while calling Ragata toxic for ranting once. People do talk about it all, rather than try to hide it. What's the worst Kirby fans had to endure for their wrongdoings? A Twitter thread that will be lost to time? A callout video that will get less than 1,000 views? And that's why I wish more channels covered this stuff. Talking about them would give the fanbase a bad look. Not talking about them will only give them more of an incentive to be toxic, eventually reaching a point where even the most positive figures can't ignore these problems. Why should we be normal, civilized people when we can just do whatever we want and the general public will still think we're angels? But of course, outside of the comment section of this video, there won't be many who will understand my point. They will just laugh at me, saying I'm overreacting, or that it's okay for people to be toxic, because they're only doing it for fun, which will only make the fandom an even more hostile place. Listen, I don't want to be remembered as a drama channel, which is why I won't cover any drama next year. I want to talk about the good things this fanbase has to offer. I really do. But focusing only on them can only do so much in the long run. I make these videos because I wanted to keep the integrity that's left. I don't want Kirby to be the next Sonico of My Little Pony. It might sound silly today, but tomorrow it could be the reality. The first defense you hear in most discussions about its toxicity is that every fandom has its bad eggs, and as it gets bigger, it's harder to moderate it. And while I agree with that sentiment, it doesn't mean we should leave those bad eggs alone, or worse, encourage them. We are part of this fandom. We have a voice in this matter as well. If we build a space where criticizing them is allowed, at least we may avoid the risk of outsiders seeing our community as a dumping ground for bad behavior. At least people will draw the distance between good apples and bad apples. Because no matter how much it may seem like it's the case, this fandom is not untouchable. There will be a day where somebody will go a step too far, where they will be the cause of an incident that will snap the internet out of its fantasy. And perhaps that will be the first time its wholesomeness is seriously put to question. You can help change the future. The people you care about can help change the future. And to do that, your actions must reflect what's proper and what isn't. So next time you see someone being negative about the franchise or fandom, don't immediately dismiss their criticism as having fun. Instead, attempt to understand their point of view. Similarly, if you feel bad for someone being treated harshly, don't let them continue getting treated like this. Don't ignore that circumstance, because not everyone is like that. Because the more you do, the more you're allowing others to say something like this or do something like this.